I pressed my thumb against the cool glass of my office window and watched the mist roll off the Willamette River, purling over the warehouses that hugged the eastern bank. 10 years earlier, I had walked into Horizon Media's Portland branch with nothing but a battered laptop, a binder of half-formed ideas, and my grandfather's silver fountain pen tucked into the breast pocket of an oversized suit. I was 31, overeager, and determined to prove that relationships, not dashboards, moved the media business. Back then, the branch was little more than a forgotten satellite. Corporate treated it as a footnote, a place to funnel the work that didn't sparkle enough for New York or Los Angeles. I found 3 desks coated in dust, 2 flickering fluorescent strips, and a coffee maker that hissed like an asthmatic cat. Still, I saw potential in the quiet corners and brick walls. I began by calling everyone I had ever met in publishing, editors I had chatted with in college, printers who once spotted me the rush fee, writers who remembered my name because I had once bought them a beer after a panel. Within 18 months, the Portland Ledger glowed black instead of red. I hired Erin to run scheduling because she could juggle 6 ringing phones while handwriting thank you notes. I recruited Luis, a data-shy but people-savvy account manager who remembered every client's birthday and the names of their children's goldfish. We sent birthday cupcakes instead of swag boxes, surprise novels instead of branded hoodies, and handwritten cards that smelled faintly of ink and coffee grounds. Clients stayed, told their friends, and the little satellite became the brightest dot on Horizon's internal maps. For a decade, I thought I had found equilibrium, a balance between the human pace of relationships and the quarterly drumbeat of corporate expectations. Then Maya Singh arrived. Maya swept in like a Pacific storm, all steel-toed efficiency and promises of exponential growth. She painted the lobby slate gray, replaced the scuffed waiting chairs with chrome stools, and hung screens on every wall that pulsed with real-time analytics. She was brilliant, no doubt. She could parse a revenue graph faster than I could tie my shoes, and she spoke in acronyms that made investors nod. But to me, her vision felt like replacing gardeners with drones. Her first month, she canceled our Friday morning donut ritual, citing sugar and lost productivity. The second month, she embedded a CRM that pinged reminders to call clients at optimized intervals. The third month, she hired consultants who clucked at our birthday cupcakes and called them unscalable artifacts. I argued, gently at first, then with rising heat, that our artifacts were the very reason clients trusted us. Maya listened, tilting her head the way a scientist studies a curious but obsolete beetle. I reread that white paper the night before everything broke. I tried to keep an open mind, scribbling notes in the margins, circling jargon like behavioral retargeting synergy. But each page felt like a brick on my chest. The next morning, April rain drumming on the roof, I found a calendar invite for a 15-minute chat with HR. No agenda, no context. My stomach tightened. When I walked into the glass cube of a conference room, Maya offered me a polite smile that didn't touch her eyes. HR cleared their throat. They thanked me for my decade of service and then, with machine precision, explained that Horizon was re-architecting toward a digital-first future. My methodologies, they said, no longer aligned. I swallowed, nodded, and felt oddly weightless, like stepping off a curb in the dark. They offered a modest severance and a non-compete clause that stretched 9 months in 4 counties. I signed nothing that day. Instead, I walked out into the rain, loosened my tie, and let the drizzle soak the starched collar that suddenly felt absurd. By evening, my phone buzzed nonstop. Evergreen Press called first, then Cascade Books, then Timberline Publishing. Each voice carried the same tune. If you go independent, we'll follow. I spent the night at my kitchen table, legal pads spread like wings. The non-compete barred me from directly soliciting Horizon clients. But it couldn't muzzle conversations if they approached me first. Nor could it prevent me from building something entirely new. At 3:14 a.m., I registered Marshall Media Collective, LLC, paid the fee, and stared at the confirmation email until sunrise painted the clouds salmon. The warehouse on the river called to me. Vacant, drafty, with broken skylights and graffiti on the loading dock, it nevertheless had bones, old growth, beams the color of caramel, and a view of the water that made you breathe deeper. I leased it on a handshake and a promise to patch the roof myself. Luis, who had resigned the instant my departure hit Slack, helped sweep out the sawdust. Erin strung up cafe lights. We rescued a scarred conference table from a recycling center and polished it until the wood glowed like embers. Evergreen, Cascade, and Timberline became our anchor partners. We didn't sign them to retainers, we invited them into a circle. The deal was simple: share contacts, cross-promote titles, sit around our table once a month and barter expertise. We took a small orchestration fee, enough to pay rent and salaries, and in return offered access to our growing network. No dashboards, no mandatory CRMs, just FaceTime and coffee. The first meeting felt like a reunion of long-lost cousins. Editors traded printer recommendations, marketing heads swapped mailing lists, and a junior designer from Cascade sketched a joint tour poster on a napkin that would later hang framed in our lobby. I felt something bloom in my chest bigger than pride, community. Weeks blurred into deadlines and brainstorms. We patched skylights, brewed gallons of coffee, and welcomed 4 more publishers: Forest Floor Editions, Sparrow and Vine, Iron Peak Journals, and Harbolite House. Each arrival brought new stories and quirks. Sparrow and Vine's founder, Lenora, baked sourdough during negotiations. Iron Peak CEO, Victor, insisted on starting every call with a haiku. I let the oddities flourish. Culture, I believed, wasn't seeded by memos but by space to be weird. Meanwhile, Horizon faltered. Friends who remained sent hush texts, open cubes, canceled campaigns, consultants blaming legacy relationship drag. Revenue dipped. Maya pushed harder, more funnels, more scripts. She recorded video pep talks that played in the elevator, her voice urging resilience as floors flicked past. 3 months after my exit, Horizon's board convened an emergency call. The next morning, Maya resigned to pursue innovative opportunities. Rumors said the consultants billed triple their estimates. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt a melancholy awe at how quickly a decade of camaraderie could calcify under pressure. That afternoon, the board chair, Harold Pritchard, requested a lunch. We met at a riverside bistro where the waiter wore suspenders and served water in mason jars. Harold circled the point for 10 minutes before offering me Maya's vacant seat and carte blanche to restructure the company. I stirred my iced tea and pictured the chrome stools, the analytics screens, the donut-less Fridays. Then I pictured our warehouse at sunset, skylights glowing, Lenora laughing flower dust into the air. I thanked Harold but declined, citing a prior commitment to freedom. When I returned to the warehouse, the crew was painting a mural, 30 feet of swirling evergreen trees, open books for leaves, and in the center a coffee cup steaming like a campfire. I rolled up my sleeves, dipped a brush, and added a tiny silver fountain pen tucked among the branches. Months spun like bicycles. We hosted salon nights where authors read rough drafts under bare Edison bulbs, workshops where veteran editors mentored self-published newcomers, and potlucks where someone inevitably burned the vegan lasagna. By winter, we counted 12 partners. By spring, 20. We refused outside capital, funding growth through shared victories. When Evergreen landed a bestseller, the marketing playbook they refined became communal property. When Harbolite developed an audio division, they recorded podcasts for the rest of us at cost. We weren't utopian. We argued plenty over profit splits, over whether commas belonged before coordinating conjunctions, over whose turn it was to unclog the espresso machine. But the disagreements felt like family squabbles, messy yet anchored in love. A year to the day after my 15-minute exit interview, the Wall Street Journal ran a feature titled "The Human Algorithm: How Marshall Media Collective Outgrew the Robots." The author followed me around the warehouse, notebook in hand, marveling at the absence of dashboards. She asked if I feared scale. I told her scale was a ladder, and ladders were useful only if you remembered the ground from which you climbed. Publishers weekly called us the campfire in a digital blizzard. My inbox flooded with queries from Chicago, Austin, Dublin, and Wellington. I answered each personally, sometimes with a polite no. Growth, I had learned, was a spice. Too much would numb the tongue. Horizon sent one more proposal: joint ventures, revenue sharing, apology language couched in legalese. I never responded. Instead, I framed a letter, hung it in the bathroom above the hand dryer, and wrote beneath it in marker, "Choose your mentors, not your metrics." Tonight, as I write this, the warehouse hums with quiet industry. Aaron is tallying print runs at the big table. Luis is teaching a group of interns how to brew coffee without scalding the beans. The mural overhead catches moonlight, and the silver pen gleams. I think about the younger me who walked into a dusty office with a binder of half-formed ideas. I think about Maya, somewhere plotting her next conquest of efficiency. And I think about tomorrow's meeting, where a tiny press from Alaska will pitch stories carved from tundra's silence. I will listen. I will ask them about their first memories of reading by flashlight. I will hand them a cup of coffee and a pen that flows like melted midnight. We will talk about print runs and paper weight and the smell of fresh ink. Maybe they will join us, maybe not. Either way, the river will keep rolling, the warehouse lights will keep glowing, and the real algorithms, the neural ones firing between eye contact and laughter, will keep doing the quiet math of trust. And I, Jacob Marshall, will keep tending the fire. But let me slow down, because the year that carried me from that glass cube to this warehouse deserves more than headlines and milestone markers. It deserves the texture of splintered pallets, the smell of varnish that clung to our hair, the heartbreak of abandoned friendships, and the improbable laughter that stitched new ones. That is where I learned the velocity of wonder, the invisible moment when someone's eyes widen because a detail brushes their own hidden memory. Long before I knew the word marketing, I understood that people buy futures, not products. They buy the possibility that a story will enlarge them. The lesson followed me to college, where I majored in history because the narratives were bigger than me and minored in business because tuition demanded pragmatism. My first serious gig was selling specialty coffee to campus cafes. I memorized bean altitudes, harvest cycles, the terroir of Guatemalan volcanic soil. But it wasn't the facts that closed deals. It was the moment I passed around a tin of green beans and asked baristas to inhale the scent of potential. Contracts signed themselves after that. Years later, she confessed that the chip was the moment she decided to throw her lot with me. Perfection frightened her. Imperfection felt like truth. Building the team required its own choreography. Erin, our whirlwind of logistics, almost didn't join. She was set to accept a comfortable desk at a Fortune 500 when I crashed her farewell party at a karaoke bar. I took the mic, butchered a Motown classic so grievously it bordered on assault, and closed by telling her that any company willing to let me humiliate myself for talent was at least worth a coffee. She laughed herself hoarse and showed up Monday with color-coded binders and a look in her eye that promised revolution. Louis stumbled into Horizon by accident. He delivered pastries for a caterer that served one of our client breakfasts. I watched him greet every stranger by name, names he picked up from place cards within seconds. When the caterer packed up, I offered him an internship on the spot. HR balked. He lacked a bachelor's degree. I pushed, citing that memory that is half empathy, half magic. He accepted, and within a year was my right hand, predicting client mood swings the way old sailors read barometers. The tension with corporate began as a hairline crack. Monthly video calls turned into interrogations about conversion funnels. My slide decks filled with photographs, authors shaking hands with bookstore owners, librarians hugging debut novelists, and Maya's deputies dismissed them as sentimental collateral. They wanted infographics. They wanted heat maps. They wanted, above all, predictability. One call stays branded in my memory. Maya presented a projection curve soaring like a rocket. I countered with a photograph of Evergreen's founder signing books in a tiny coastal shop. The board smiled politely, then voted to go all in on automation. The crack widened. When HR scheduled that 15-minute chat, they booked the same room where, 5 years earlier, we celebrated breaking the 50 million revenue ceiling with pizzas. The smell of basil had long faded, replaced by the sterile hush of recycled air. Maya's first words were scripted. Her eyes confessed exhaustion. I almost pitied her. She had been handed a mandate to triple revenues in 2 years with zero increase in headcount. That kind of math erases humanity. Finding the warehouse turned from search into serendipity. I was jogging along the river, mind replaying legal risks, when a gust blew a for-lease flyer against my shin. The address matched the graffiti-clad building I'd admired for months. Inside, dust motes swirled like galaxies in stray shafts of light. I laughed, loud, cathartic, my voice echoing against metal rafters. It felt ridiculous and perfect. We spent the first week operating on folding tables while electricians wrestled with ancient wiring. There was one functional power outlet. Luis improvised a rotation schedule, half an hour for laptops, half an hour for the espresso grinder, half an hour for Erin's label printer. In downtime, we hand-addressed envelopes, pressing old wax seals Luis found at a thrift store. Clients posted photos of the seals on social media, calling them analog love letters. Orders spiked. Evergreen's first collaborative project in the collective was a multi-author essay series on nature writing. Timberline offered cover design, Cascade contributed distribution to college bookstores, Sparrow and Vine baked limited edition loaf cakes stamped with ISBN numbers into the crust. A publicity stunt so charming we ended up on local morning TV. Those cakes sold out in 90 minutes and raised enough to fund our shared internship program. Speaking of interns, we structured their rotation like an academic semester. Week 1, printing presses. Week 2, digital layout. Week 3, marketing by conversation, my personal seminar on the art of listening. I made every intern perform an exercise called silent coffee. 2 people sit, sip, and say nothing for 3 minutes. Only then does conversation begin. The silence forces observation, the way steam curls, the texture of mug glaze, the micro-expressions before speech. The interns complained at first, then asked for extensions. Not all stories were triumphs. We botched a campaign for Iron Peak's poetry anthology, misprinting a line break that inverted a metaphor and alienated purists. The run was 5,000 copies. We could have buried the error, but we recalled every copy, pasted an apology note on each, and invited customers to mail them back in exchange for corrected editions plus a handwritten poem by the author. That vulnerability turned fiasco into folklore. The anthology sold double projections. Meanwhile, Maya's consultant army published a white paper autopsy blaming Horizon's slump on legacy attachment bias. The phrase became a running joke at the warehouse. We printed t-shirts that read "proudly biased toward people" and wore them during a city book fair. Our booth glowed like a hearth amid neon banners hawking AI-curated reading lists. By quarter 4, our financials surprised even me. Revenue outpaced my old Portland department at its peak, but the profit margin stayed slim by design. We reinvested into shared services. A community print-on-demand machine, a podcast studio, and a scholarship fund for underrepresented voices. I remembered a board meeting years ago where someone said, "A business that doesn't maximize profit is a charity." I wish they could see us now, thriving by maximizing purpose. Let me dwell on one winter evening, because impact sometimes hides in trivia. It was December, snow flirting with the sidewalks, when a high school senior named Tasha emailed our general inbox. She had discovered an out-of-print fantasy novel from 1978 in her grandmother's attic and wanted permission to stage a theatrical adaptation for her drama club. The rights were a labyrinth owned partially by Evergreen and a defunct British imprint. Traditional bureaucracy would have stalled for months. Instead, we settled everything over 3 video calls, and the club sent us a filmed performance. I watched teenagers slay cardboard dragons and felt the promise of another generation catching fire. Horizon's second proposal arrived on the eve of our anniversary gala, a glossy folder of legal parchment embossed with silver filigree, as if aesthetics could numb the undertone of surrender. They offered partnership, autonomy, and a budget triple what I once managed, but the fine print still spoke of KPIs and phase gates. I slipped the offer under a stack of auction catalogs and danced the night away in the warehouse lit by 200 candles floating in mason jars. When dawn broke, the candles were stubs, the offer untouched. By spring, 25 publishers called the collective home. We organized them into guild-like circles: Editors Roundtable, Cover Artists Guild, Audio Narrators Chorus. Each circle held monthly salons. Cross-circle gatherings resembled Renaissance fairs minus the turkey legs. I listened as a narrator with a voice like bourbon debated a cover artist who swore by minimalism, their dialogue rippling into spontaneous collaboration, a limited-run audiobook with illustrated chapter interludes. Outside, the world kept spinning digital webs. New startups promised algorithmic storytelling, generating plot lines based on market sentiment. Investors drooled. I downloaded one beta for curiosity. The story it produced read like a paint-by-numbers sunset, technically vibrant, emotionally vacant. I printed it out and used the pages to wrap the 15 porcelain mugs we shipped to new interns, a silent lesson in the hierarchy of value. The Wall Street Journal feature triggered a deluge of speaking invitations. Conferences dangled honoraria. Universities offered adjunct posts. I accepted 2, declined 30. Stage lights tempt ego, but I remembered my father cracking open random volumes in that cedar library, trusting sentences to carry their own torch. My flame belonged here, among pallets of fresh ink books waiting for dawn deliveries. Before I leave this narrative, let me honor the ghosts, colleagues who stayed at Horizon, who chose the safety of salary over the leap into uncertainty. I hold no grudge. Risk tolerances differ like fingerprints. Some meet their greatest joy within constraints, sculpting beauty from the boundaries of a system. I send them handwritten notes on their birthdays, not as recruitment bait, but as simple reminders that they are not forgotten by history simply because they chose a different fork in the trail. We also maintain a ritual called Quiet Hour every Wednesday. Between 2 and 3 in the afternoon, the entire warehouse falls silent. No calls, no music, just the shuffling of pages and the scratching of pens. The first time we tried it, Luis looked skeptical. 30 minutes in, he teared up, claiming he heard the heartbeat of the building. Maybe he did. Maybe we all do now. Silence, like darkness, is not the enemy, it is the canvas. So why write this account at all? Because stories calcify into myths if unrecorded, and myths, though powerful, risk distortion. I want the record to show my footprint and its muddy imperfections, the contracts I misdated, the coffee I spilled on a first edition, the time I mistakenly shipped a case of romance novels to a monastery in Idaho. The monks kept them, citing theological curiosity. Success is not a polished statue. It's a mosaic of cracked tiles. There is a final memory I nearly forgot. My silver fountain pen ran dry the day we signed our 20th partner. I unscrewed the barrel, intending to replace the cartridge, and paused. The nib was worn to a sliver, metal thinned by a decade of thank you notes. I considered retiring it to a glass case, but tools yearned for use. Instead, I drove to a woodworking shop, carved a new grip from olive wood, and pressed the nib into fresh housing. The pen felt both ancient and new, the perfect symbol for a company that worships the marriage of legacy and invention. Tonight, the pen rests in my pocket, warm from body heat. I will use it tomorrow when that Alaskan press arrives, when I sign the memorandum of belonging, not employment, never that. Belonging. Outside, the river murmurs. Trains whistle beyond the bridge. Somewhere downtown, automated ads follow commuters across screens, whispering convenience. Let them. Here, between brick and timber, between silence and song, we steward a slower algorithm, a hand-to-hand protocol older than commerce. If you ever find yourself in Portland, follow the river until the streetlights thin and the scent of espresso mingles with sawdust. Knock on the warehouse door. Someone will answer with a mug, a question, and, if you're willing, an invitation to tell your story into the hush of our quiet hour. That is how we keep the fire burning, one story, one mug, one imperfect chipped cup at a time. Forever.